Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little differently. You can tell that I'm not on the range. I'm actually in my kitchen. So I'm going to take a little break from the gun content and do something just kind of fun, which is to make some homemade wine. Now, if you've looked around at making homemade wine, you've probably seen that everybody doing it has a bunch of specialized equipment. They've got these glass jugs and these corks and these airlocks and these different things for transferring wine here and there, and all kinds of sterilization equipment and all kinds of stuff like that. But if you want to do it the cheap and easy way, you don't really need all that stuff. So in today's video, I'm going to kind of show you a really cheap, easy way to make some homemade wine that's pretty good, and it doesn't require much equipment at all. So what I have in front of me is the absolute bare minimum of ingredients that you need, and that is going to be some pre-packaged juice. I've got some white grape juice here, some just regular sugar, and then you're going to need some yeast. Now this is wine yeast, and this, if you want to do the minimal route, this is the only thing that you kind of need to buy that was a little bit specialty, but this is Red Star champagne yeast. And the reason I use this is the yeast that ferments to the highest alcohol content. So it can, basically yeast works by turning sugar into alcohol. And the stronger the yeast is, the longer it can last in a high alcohol environment before it dies. So the way that you know wine is done fermenting is when all the yeast dies and falls to the bottom. So in this example here, I'm going to be using just this juice, some sugar, and this yeast, and no other equipment. Now I've got another jug here where I'm going to show you a little bit of equipment, but still very minimal. So that would be to use a cork and an airlock. So in this example over here, I'm just going to, when I get done putting everything together, while the wine ferments, I'm going to put the cap on the jug loosely so that the air can escape as it ferments. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and use an airlock. Now, if you've found this because you've looked into making wine and you've seen all the different equipment that everybody says you need to have, this is a pretty cheap part of it. So you can find these on Amazon. You can find these corks on Amazon. This will cost you a couple bucks if you want to go that route. So I'm going to do it both ways and just kind of take you along. So first things first, I'm going to pour a little bit of juice out of the jug just to give us room to add in some of the sugar. And then I'll pour back as much as I can fit back in the jug once I get the sugar added. So I do have a funnel. This isn't necessarily a specialty thing. This is just a kitchen tool. You don't have to use this if you don't want to. You can just dump it out of here straight in the jug if you're not worried about making a mess. So I'm going to use, you can experiment with this and add however much you want, but the sugar is to add some extra sugar into the equation for the yeast to work on. So you could not add any sugar at all. You could just dump the yeast in, let it go, and it would ferment to whatever alcohol level that the sugar in here will allow it to go to. But if you want to get your alcohol level up a little bit, you can add a little bit of sugar or a lot of sugar, and it's going to ferment until, like I said, the alcohol level reaches the point where the yeast dies. And then if you put too much sugar in, you'll get a sweet wine. If you put less sugar in, you'll get a drier wine. So in today's example, I'm going to be adding a half cup of sugar to both of these jugs. And this is something that I just I tinker with and decide however much I want to add. Now there's different opinions on using just regular white table sugar. Some people like to buy like concentrate, like juice concentrate that gets the actual, natural sugars in there. My feeling is that it's just sugar that's getting converted to wine. It doesn't really matter the source of the sugar. You may notice a taste difference, but if you're making kitchen wine from juice that you bought at the store, taste probably isn't going to be a fine wine. Okay, so once we've got our sugar measured out, we'll go ahead and dump it in here. And then another reason for pouring some of the juice out is to give you some room to shake this up. So I like to just tip it up, shake it pretty vigorously. Shake it a couple times. You can let it settle out a little bit and then shake it some more. But we'll go ahead and shake this up until the sugar is all the way dissolved in the juice. Okay, now that I've got the sugar good and dissolved in the juice, I'm going to just go ahead and add back some of this juice that we poured out, just to try to get as full of a jug as possible for this. So you want to leave a little space at the top, especially if you're doing something like not a white grape, if you're doing like a red grape like this. This, when you shake it up with the sugar, is going to get really foamy up top. So if you get it too close to the top, you're going to have stuff froth out the top and make a mess. With the white stuff, it doesn't really do that, so you can fill it a little bit more full, but that's about where I'm going to leave it, and we're just going to drop our yeast, and that's going to be the end of it. It'll ferment on its own, and we'll check back in on it. So now, like I said, I buy this on Amazon, and they're usually going to come in these like 10 packs or something like that. This is one that is a partial packet. Now, once you open the yeast, you want to store these in the refrigerator to make them last a little longer if it's going to be a little while before you use it. So this is one that I've had in the fridge for just probably about a week. So I'm going to use this. So as far as the amount of yeast that you need to use, that's the packets tell you how much to use, but I kind of just do it by feel, and I'm using just a regular kitchen teaspoon here, and I'm going to do about that much. So there are, there's different ways to like prepare your yeast. You can mix it in a little bit and let it sit for a while or something like that. I don't know. I just dump it straight in, and I've never had a problem. Like I said, we're doing this the easy, cheap way. So the easier the method, the better. So now, like I said, instead of using an airlock, all I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly screw this cap on, and I'm going to make sure that it's, fairly loose so that it can move kind of up and down on the threads so that air can escape out. If you screw it on tight, this is going to ferment, it's going to build pressure, and it'll just pop. So you want to make sure there's play where the air can escape out. I'll jump in here and just kind of show you what the yeast looks like after you dump it in, and it's going to kind of fall to the bottom. Okay, so for this one, this is all we're going to do. Now I'm going to go put this jug in a cool, dark place and just let it go. It's going to take about 24 hours before you start to notice it starting to eat that sugar. But once that happens, it'll go anywhere for about a week until it's got all the sugar fermented out and the yeast all dies. And at that point, we can go ahead and pour it off of the dead yeast. But for now, I'm going to move this to a cool, dark place, and I'm going to go show you the other method. Okay, for this example, I went ahead and opened it. I poured off some of the extra juice. I've got a half cup of sugar here. I'll go ahead and dump that in. We'll go ahead and shake that sugar up, get it good and dissolved. Now you can see what I mean about using a red grape, and even though this is a mixture of cranberry and grape, that's something else I should mention, is you can make wine out of pretty much any juice. As long as it's got sugar in it, you can make wine out of it. So, but you see it with the red grape, how much of this foam you get at the top. That's the reason when you add back in the juice, you're going to want to keep it a little further from the top, especially since I'm going to be using an airlock on this one. This stuff, when it starts to ferment, can come up into this airlock and get a bunch of gunk in there and kind of make a mess. So keep it a little further from the top on this kind of juice. So the only difference here, we're going to follow the exact same steps here. We're going to put some yeast in there. About that much. Drop it straight in. And then the only difference here being is I'm going to use this rubber cork, and I'm going to push that down just as hard as I can onto this bottle. You want a good tight seal. And then I'm going to take this airlock, and you can fill these up with water, but basically you're trying to fill, there's a couple lines here, you're trying to fill it about to here where the fluid comes around to both of these lines. Or actually when you fill it up, you'll just basically kind of fill one of these up and then it'll work its way around. But you can fill these up with water. What I like to do is use a distilled alcohol. I use vodka just to keep anything gross from growing in here while it's going. You know, if you use water and you've got some bacteria in there, you could get some mold growing in here. So if you want to eliminate that, you can just pour a little bit of vodka in there and then run it that way so that it stays clean. So I've just got some cheap vodka. Pour it in here. Like I said, you're trying to get it, well, it worked out about perfect. So you're trying to get about like that. Then you put this cap on and go ahead and stick it in here. So the airlock is just going to ensure that as it ferments, that only air is coming out and no air is coming back in. So as long as you pay attention to the fermentation, the other way that we're doing it will work just fine, because as the fermentation is happening, pressure is building and only air is going out. No air is really going to be able to make its way back in because it's under pressure. Now the place where the airlocks are helpful is if you get to the end and it's kind of stalled or it's going really slowly, there might not be enough pressure building in that jug to keep the air outside from coming in. Not that there's a huge problem with that, you just run the risk of some contamination making its way in. Really, it's probably not that big a deal, but the airlocks, like I said, are cheap, and it's a pretty good insurance against having anything go wrong. One thing that is helpful is to write on your bottle, if you're doing different amounts of sugar in several different bottles, write how much you did and write the date that you started fermenting. I like to do the date I started fermenting, and then when I'm done, I like to do the date that I bottle. So it's helpful to keep track of those dates. So now I will go ahead and put this jug in the same place as the other one, and we'll check back in on them when they start to ferment. I'll show you what that looks like, and then I'll come back at the end and show you what the finished product looks like and some of the ways that you can go about what we'll call bottling it very cheaply as well without any extra equipment. So we'll go ahead and fast forward to that part. Okay, so I've got both of these jugs in a cool, dark place. This is actually going to be underneath a bathroom sink, and these will be where they sit while they ferment. It's important to put it somewhere cool. You don't want it to be too hot as it tries to ferment. You can get some off flavors from that and some other problems. But so this is just a climate-controlled bathroom. Pretty good place to do it, and we'll check back in on them when they start to ferment. This is about 36 hours after I started the jugs, and you can see that they're rolling along nicely. This one is bubbling in the airlock, and then you can see all the bubbles coming to the top. That is the yeast converting the sugar to alcohol. And then this other one, this one's rolling really nicely. So they'll continue on. This white grape juice is going a little faster right now. It'll probably finish a little earlier. I did one of these cran grape before, and it takes a little bit longer to ferment than this regular grape juice does. Well, it's been about 2 weeks of fermentation on the jugs that I started at the beginning of this video. Unfortunately, they're not quite done yet. They're still fermenting pretty good. So in the interest of going ahead and wrapping this up and showing you what I do at the end, I've got another jug here that I started about a week before those two that is done. And so I'll go ahead and show you how I go about bottling and finishing up this process. So once again, no special equipment. I've just got a pitcher and I've got one of my wine jugs. So this one did have an airlock, but doesn't matter. This process is the same. So we'll go ahead and take that out, set it to the side. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this wine off of the dead yeast and the sediment that ends up at the bottom of the jug, and you'll be able to see it a little better once I get done. So I'm just going to slowly pour this off. And what we're going to be left with at the bottom of the jug here is, you can see, a bunch of sediment and dead yeast and any kind of solids that was in the juice that's falling out as that's becoming wine. Because as your juice turns to wine, it's going to clarify, it's going to get a lot more transparent than the juice first was in the bottle. So, and I should have mentioned before I poured it off, but the way that you can tell that it's done fermenting is, obviously if you have an airlock, you can see when it stops bubbling. But you just basically, you look at the surface of the juice and it'll be fairly obvious. You won't have these little bubbles just coming to the surface, meaning that it's fermenting. So once it just kind of looks dead, you know that the fermentation is over. So like I said, now I've just poured it off, and I'm gonna go just rinse this out. Basically, I'll rinse it out with hot water, and then I will let the jug dry, and then I'm gonna pour this back into the same jug. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you'll have extras of these laying around, so you could make this step a little faster. But in the meantime, I'm gonna just set this off to the side, rinse this out, let it dry, set it upside down, let it get fully dry, and then I'll just pour this juice back in, and it'll be done. And I will put this away and let it age for a little bit. But I'm gonna go ahead and rinse this out, pour it back in, and we'll talk about final steps. So now I've got it poured back in the original jug, and that's pretty much all there is to it. This is now wine that you've made with almost no equipment. So one thing that you will want to do, since we're not using hydrometers or anything like that to make sure that the fermentation is absolutely done, I like to put these in the pantry, and then every couple days you want to just kind of come squeeze the bottle, and if it's starting to build some pressure, there's probably a little bit of final fermentation happening. And basically all you're going to do is just crack the top and burp the air out. And you may have to do that for a week or so. Just check it periodically and let any air out that continues to build as the final bits of fermentation happen. But it's just a good idea to do that. And you're probably going to want to let this sit for, I'd say, a couple weeks at least, to give the taste time to mature just a little bit. I mean, you could drink it right now if you wanted to, but it's going to be a pretty strong kind of new wine taste that'll get better as it sits a little bit. Now, I don't let them sit for months or years or anything like that. After a couple weeks, it's going to be mellow enough that you can drink it. And like I said, this isn't going to be a fine wine, so do whatever you want, let it age however you want, but you can drink it right now if you wanted to. And what I like to do is pour it over a little bit of ice. That's the way I like to drink it, so however you like to do it should be just fine. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.